Beautiful people. Beautiful people in Melbourne today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's fantastic to see so many smiling faces. Oh, no, I thought it went out. My privilege today to see this event. We'll see how this goes. My name is Chris. I don't know what's going on. Give us 1 second.
We're on again. Okay, so that microphone was clearly made by the federal government. It's my privilege today to be MC for the proceedings. I am, as you would probably recognise, a political nobody. Who knows me? Yeah, a couple of people. Okay, well, fantastic, fantastic. My name is Chris Needham, and I have been involved in the Libertarian Party for the last few years, pretty much since the COVID lockdowns. How many people have gotten more involved in politics since that time? Yeah, a lot of you. Fantastic. Now, I'm not making the presumption that today we all believe the same thing about everything. That's kind of not the point. But we are all here for one cause, are we not? We're here to share our thoughts and express our speech and our sentiments about the proposed MAD bill, beautifully titled. I want to welcome everybody on behalf of the Libertarian Party, and we've got some others from outside the Libertarian Party today as well. So the public consultation for this bill, we've had so far 22,000 people respond. How many of you responded in opposition to this bill? Fantastic, that's really good to see. Congratulate yourselves, a round of applause. Just for the sake of formalities, I'm going to run through the four main bullet points about the bill for those people who might not yet be across it. It gives power to unelected bureaucrats to censor political speech. The tech giants are supposedly to act as enforcers, but the tech companies are threatened with huge fines. 5% of global turnover could be $9 billion for a company like Facebook. There's vague definitions of harm that allow suppression of even truthful discourse. And the bill represents a serious threat to free speech and democracy. I'm sure that much you know. I wanted to quickly rip through a couple of housekeeping matters. We have public toilets off behind you, sort of up the hill a little bit to the east side of the park. We have a barbecue, so if you're hungry, if you're thirsty, we've got some food and drinks over here on one of the marquees. We have water and soft drinks available. We have merch available from the merch stand if any of you are keen to pick up some libertarian merch and join the cause. And when we leave, please make sure that all the rubbish goes in the bins around the park. We want to leave the place as we found it. So first of all, I know the answer to this question. I'm going to ask you a few Dorothy Dixers, okay? Who's troubled by what's going on currently with the way our government is governing us? Yeah, I thought so. That's a nice easy win, easy quiz. Who thinks Australia doesn't appear to be what it used to be at the moment? Yep, let's get parochial, right? The parochial Aussie battler, being helped out by their mates. The ability to sniff out bullcrap from 50 paces. Where's that gone? It's here, right? At least we got that much. The hard work ethic and a lack of complaint. The straight-talking, no-nonsense types who love their country and stand with their mates. That's the Australia I remember. That's the Australia I want. How about you guys? Fantastic. Another Dorothy Dixer. Who's read George Orwell's 1984? Yeah. Who hasn't read it? A few? Okay. I'm not gonna make jokes. I'm gonna suggest you do. Compelling reading, but make sure you've got some alcohol with you. Who's familiar from that book and the movie? Who's familiar with doublethink and thought crime? All these new words we're starting to experience in real time. How about newspeak, aka political correctness? Unperson. People were unpersoned in 1984, aka cancelled. How many people believe that it's important to be able to challenge orthodoxies rather than abandoning them? Debate can be healthy. How many people remember when we could disagree with each other and still be mates? How many people want more of that back? All right, fantastic. That's what we're here to brief for and share today. Couple of quotes for you. For those that know me, I love quotes. I've got so many quotes in my head, but I'm still going to read them out just to be certain I get them right. Censorship is the child of fear, the father of ignorance, and the weapon of tyrants. By Laurie Holtz Anderson. I've got another question for you in the audience. Who here has children and wants their kids to grow up in a world with the ability to think and speak freely? To grow, to learn, to make mistakes, to experience life in all its adventures? Absolutely. Whoever would overthrow a liberty of nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech. That's Benjamin Franklin. And another one, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. In our country, the lie has become not just a moral category, but a pillar of the state. Does that sound familiar? You know, there is one bit of truth that I've really struggled with the last few years. Something I didn't want to be true, but I think it is. We get the government we deserve. That's really harsh, right? Too true. Very much so. It's a bitter pill to swallow. We've spent too much time and energy focusing on left and right, and not enough on the lesser-known political axis, tyranny versus liberty, also known as authoritarian versus libertarian. So if you're here today from the left, how many people would identify as from the left? Welcome. No, I mean it. I mean it. Welcome. Absolutely. How many people from the right? And how many people somewhere in between? Yeah, there's everybody, right? So we're all here. We're all united for this cause. That's what I'm loving to see today. So thank you very much for taking time out of your day to rock up. One quick more anecdote for myself. I am one such person who is done with yelling at the TV, at the news. I no longer watch it, but I just couldn't keep doing that from the comfort of my couch. How many people feel the same way? You have to be involved, right? We've got to be part of the solution instead of remaining part of the problem. I had to get off my backside. That's why I got involved, even if it was just to drop leaflets on behalf of political candidates that I supported. Today, I'm somebody who's decided to reject apathy about our state of affairs. I'm no longer just somebody who criticises politicians, although it is an Aussie pastime. I'm someone who's decided enough is enough and to get involved. Somebody who wants to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Someone who's prepared to stand firm and resist the tyrannical forces we currently face together. I'm a 49-year-old father of 2 beautiful daughters, and I want them to have a future of their own choosing. Not one determined for them by a tyrannical government, enabled by a conforming, compliant and apathetic public. Disobedience is the true foundation of liberty. The obedient must be slaves. By Henry David Thoreau. I have so many quotes. I'm not going to bore you with them all. But I will say, a nation of sheep will beget a government of wolves, by Edward Murrow. So as a call to action, before I introduce today's speakers, I would like you to turn to the person nearest you who you don't already know and introduce yourself, shake a hand, look them in the eyes and smile. We've been divided the last few years intentionally, both politically in terms of what's acceptable or not acceptable to say, the voice referendum, lockdowns, etc. We need to look out for each other. We need to be reunited as a community, and we need to be able to speak, to voice our thoughts, to exchange and challenge ideas. I'm actually really glad to hear that chatter. Ordinarily it'd be a case of, why aren't they listening? But no, I did ask you, didn't I? I did. It's imperative that we have more Australians being proactive and involved in politics today. This is our civic responsibility, to show up, to vote, to speak out, to volunteer. We must use our freedoms or we will lose them. We'll hear more detail about this later from some of our speakers, but there are more bills coming at us in the pipeline that are worse than this. So please do not think that by showing up today the job is done. Far, far from it. We need you guys to be politically active from now until we recover. And who's to say how long that will take? We need every one of you to stay involved and encourage others to get involved. They only win if we the people let them win. So with that, I would like to introduce our first official speaker today, Dr. Reuben Kirkham, the co-director of the Free Speech Union. How many people know about the Free Speech Union? Yep, fantastic. You're certainly going to know more about them after this next split. Reuben's been a relentless champion of free speech and civil liberties in Australia, working to safeguard the right to express diverse opinions without fear of censorship or reprisal. The Free Speech Union, in fact, I'm not even going to keep reading this out. I want you to tell us about Free Speech Union, Reuben. You will do it far better justice than myself. So take the stage, Reuben. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'd like to start with some good news. In 11 days, we managed to produce 26,000 submissions, individual submissions against the misinformation bill. That is just the Free Speech Union. So people in Parliament will be very busy. And we hope that this will defeat the misinformation bill. There are people understanding what is happening, senators, and we hope that they will pay attention to what people have said and they will stop it. But one thing that's worrying is how deep the misinformation bill goes. It isn't just the definition of the speech, which is embarrassing enough, which covers things basically protecting every government interest or elite interest you could think of. Its net is a lot wider. The social media companies are only rewarded for censorship. They're not rewarded for keeping content online. So anything that might fall over the line or might upset the government is a risk to them. Your account is a risk to them if you're saying the things that the government doesn't want, or ACMA thinks the government doesn't want. So unless it's X, which is still a platform for free speech, you are going to be heavily censored online if this passes. I've got some more bad news. So they'll also make up powers. We have been fighting the E-Safety Commissioner, E-Karen, some of you call her, Julian Mangrant. What we found is she makes up powers and applies them. She writes to GoDaddy and gets people's websites taken down. But then she never tells them, even though she's supposed to tell them that she's issued a notice, because it wasn't a real notice, because she didn't really have the power to issue a notice, and therefore you couldn't appeal the notice. I mean, it sounds like a sort of government procedural onion, and it is. We are challenging that in the legal system. But ACMA, e-safety, they are one and the same. So this is exactly what they will do. It's not just the content of the bill, it's worse. And you can, in theory, if this bill passes, telling people about VPNs to avoid ACMA's censorship could get you fined. You could get the extraordinary fines aimed at you personally. It isn't just social media companies that are targeted. But we will fight this, we will win. And our MC mentioned other bills. I'm actually more worried about the other bills that are even worse. There's another bill where submissions are due on the 11th of October. It's the privacy bill. Privacy sounds like a good thing, right? And I agree. But it's not about privacy, it's about censorship. If you say, for example, that Roxanne Tickle was a man called Jason, you could get 7 years in prison under that new provision. If you say where Dan Andrews plays golf, you could get 7 years in prison. This is not about doxing. It covers giving people's email addresses out. It covers basically things they don't want you to know about someone. I mean, do you want democratic accountability? Well, if you do, you definitely should be challenging that privacy bill. They've also got a hate speech bill. There's a hate speech bill being planned in Victoria. There's a hate speech bill being planned by the federal government. You've got a lot of writing to do if you want to stop these bills. But we were making sure everyone is aware. We'll be making sure there are thousands and thousands of submissions on each of those bills, so that Parliament cannot just simply pass them and pretend that people are not opposed. And we are making legislators aware. A lot of these bills have got hidden things in. Doxing sounds like, something that is something you should be protected from. But then they redraft it they redefine doxing to include this long list of personal information. Not even private information, personal information is covered by it. That's the sneakiness of how they do it. Censors are always sneaky. And it's important to ensure that, we hold them to account. And we will be holding them to account. And please do join the Free Speech Union. We need everyone to join this fight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reuben. The next speaker we've got for today is Mel Jeffries. Mel, where are you? Oh, here she is. Fantastic. Now, let me just do a quick intro. Mel is a detransitioned woman, and that's my doorbell, and a psychiatric survivor. Last year, she appeared on Channel 7's Spotlight to speak about how her life has been irreversibly harmed by transgender medicine. Her experience highlights the need for robust public dialogue about the risks that self-ID poses in law, healthcare, education and broader society. And she also has a petition to halt gender affirmation practices in Victoria. Currently about 2,260 signatures. We're needing about 10,000 to trigger the debate in the upper house. This bill was sponsored by Maura Deeming, but she's been a little tied up lately with her defamation trial. So we'll forgive her that for sure. Mel, please come take the stage and share your story with us. Thank you.
Hello. Earlier this year, the Honourable Mary Ann Thomas wrote in a response to a petition seeking an inquiry into the state of transgender medicine in Victoria. The Allen government is committed to ensuring trans and gender diverse young people can access the care they need. I am well aware there is a lot of misinformation in the community about the trans community, and in particular, the care and treatment for trans and gender diverse young people. This is concerning and harmful to trans and gender diverse Victorians, their families and friends. This misinformation has gotten worse since the release of the Cass Review in the United Kingdom. She goes on to say, Channel 7's spotlight on the treatment and care for young people has been widely discredited. The story profiled 3 young people, one of those being American, who received care and treatment in the American healthcare system, not in Australia. This selective sample size is not representative of the many young people supported by gender-affirming care who have better health and well-being outcomes because of this care and treatment. I like how she completely skips over my experience. I'm a Victorian resident who received gender-affirming care in this state from the ages 18 to 31. Tomorrow is my 7-year anniversary for my top surgery. I received public funding for that. I don't appreciate having my experiences, all my trauma, being labelled as misinformation or disinformation. In the Spotlight episode, I described my experience as a medical catastrophe. I won't be silenced about the harm I have experienced. I will not stop fighting for justice and accountability for what I have experienced. I'm doing what I can, but I cannot do this alone. We cannot stay silent and allow them to continue to marginalise and disenfranchise important discussion that needs to occur. There is no future if we do not fight for it. Thank you.
She's not the only one that's got to pull themselves together now. After that, Mel, such bravery. Such bravery. Thank you so much, Mel. We're going to keep going with speeches. The next speaker for today, we're actually running all the way through the speeches now because the forecast is against us. Krystle Mitchell is a candidate for Melbourne City Council. How many people already know Krystle? For those of you who don't, Krystle is a former acting senior sergeant within Victoria Police. And she made headlines in 2021 when she resigned live on the show Discernible with Matt Wong in protest of the enforcement of COVID-19 public health orders. She expressed discomfort with how police were being used to enforce restrictions that she believed infringed on civil liberties, particularly highlighting the psychological toll on both officers and the community. Her decision to leave the force after 16 years was driven by a conflict between her personal morals and the role she was asked to play in enforcing the government's pandemic policies. Following her resignation, she became politically active, joining the then Liberal Democrats, now the Libertarian Party, In 2022, she ran as the second candidate on their Senate ticket for Victoria, supporting policies promoting personal freedoms and limited government intervention. She aligned with prominent figures like David Limbrick, who you'll hear from in a little bit, a vocal opponent of the state's pandemic measures. In 2024, her focus shifted to local politics and announced her candidacy for the Melbourne City Council election. She's leading Your Voice Matters to Me ticket, backed by the Libertarian Party, although she's not officially listed as a Libertarian on the ballot due to some late submission of party endorsement paperwork. But she's still our Libertarian, our Krystle. Her platform emphasises improving community engagement and opposing corporate influence on council decisions. Her political career reflects a strong stance on civil liberties, shaped by her experiences during the pandemic and her desire to challenge government overreach at both the state and local levels. Krystle Mitchell, we salute you. We invite you to come speak.
Well, hello everybody. First, I just really wanted to thank everyone for coming. I know we all have other things that we could be doing with our time today. I was supposed to be moving house, but you know, we have an over-exuberant government on the path to speech oppression, so I decided to come here and give a speech in opposition to that. So I want to talk about the Mad Bill and what happens if it gets up, the dangers of public officials deciding what counts as misinformation and disinformation. And I think that this topic, it not only challenges our values of free speech and open discourse, but it raises fundamental questions about who we will allow to hold the power to define truth in our society. And at this very minute, governments at a federal and state level are making those decisions for us. And I don't think that we should let them. So before we dive in, let's define the terms as the government has labelled them. Misinformation is simply false information that is spread without harmful intent, while disinformation is false information deliberately spread to mislead. So both ultimately do pose challenges to informed public discourse, but the response to these threats from the government has become really controversial. And if we look back to the handling of information during the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw governments around the world demand that their official truth be the single source of truth. I'm fairly certain that there'll be a few here that remember that from Jacinda Ardern. And while we navigated complex information, data, and a desire for open and balanced conversations, we wanted to have the conversation about what that 100-year event should do to our democracy. In Victoria, we saw that person implement some of the harshest lockdown measures in the world, which he claimed was for protecting public health. But we all know that it actually led to a lot of confusion, job losses, relationship breakdowns, increased family violence, suicides, and epidemic levels of mental health issues. So who was the spreader of misinformation then? Or was it disinformation? If the government had restricted speech laws during that time, more so than they did through the pressures to social media giants like Facebook and Twitter, the situation could have been even more dire to those struggling with the anti-democratic decision-making. So just think about it. If we'd had a system where the officials were allowed to label any opposing views as misinformation. Sorry, the wind is getting my... so if... Try again. So if we'd had a system where the officials had been allowed to label any opposing views as misinformation, many of the now proven legitimate concerns about lockdowns and restrictions could have been completely silenced. People questioning the effectiveness of the measures or discussing the mental health impacts could not only have faced the backlash that they did, but actual jail time under the proposed laws. And that ultimately leads to a society where only one narrative prevails. Where were you accessing your information from during COVID? So apart from mainstream media, I was absorbing information from Telegram, Signal, and from critics like Topher, Avi, Rukshan, Craig Kelly, Reignite Democracy, and our own political representatives, David Limbrick, Tim Quilty and Dr. Catherine Cumming. All of these people, under this proposed law, could have been silenced with criminal charges. I know so many of you who have personally told me what my own speaking out did to your resolve and spirit. Would I have done so if it had guaranteed me jail time? I don't want to be put into a position where I'm faced with making that decision. The proposed changes to Victoria's anti-vilification laws also add to this concern. These laws aim to expand what counts as vilification, even including strong emotions and ridicule. Just imagine that. Expressing frustration or ridicule could be considered a form of vilification. Stupid decisions that cause significant detriment to the community deserve to be ridiculed. Incompetence and unethical behaviour by our politicians needs to be called out, and there is a real possibility that these kinds of concerns could be silenced. Expressing ridicule, even in a legitimate political context, could lead to punishment, and it's really hard to see how that benefits a healthy democracy. If the federal bill becomes law, it's not hard to imagine a future where people become even more sceptical of government messaging, questioning whether they're being told the full truth or any real truth at all. And when people can't express dissent or engage in open discussions without fear of being jailed for doing so, trust in the government during critical moments is completely eradicated. These are not far-fetched concerns, especially considering how that person wielded power during the pandemic. If the government can decide which views are allowed and which are not, it gives them a dangerous level of control of public discourse. Trust is built on transparency and honesty, not censorship. This also isn't just a slippery slope of who gets to decide what is true. We're already on the slide. You know what we're called now, and you know how much we were already censored during COVID, and even now we are being censored over Australia's mortality rate. There is a very real and present risk that the power of this bill will be used to criminally silence opposition and maintain control, which is something that they do in countries like China and North Korea. Is this who we really want to be modelling our democracy on? So what can we do? The answer, I'm afraid, is not a quick fix solution, and it will require effort on our part. It does lie in promoting critical thinking and protecting free speech, turning up to events like today to hear from people, connect with like-minded democracy lovers, and promote the virtues of free speech in a democratic society. We also need to improve our online engagement culture. Sometimes we are so prepared to throw the baby out with the bathwater when someone gets it wrong that we haven't created the space for ourselves to be the best arbiters of what is truth, fiction, or fantasy. We need to accept that it's okay to get it wrong on the internet, and that it's okay to say sorry when we get it wrong, and that it's okay to accept somebody's apology. We need to do better online and in print. We can be the best moderators of truth, not the government. I think that the government should be encouraging debate, not stifling it through legislation like the Combating Misinformation and Disinformation Bill, or through overly restrictive vilification laws that could lead to criminalise emotional responses or satire. The dangers of allowing public officials to decide what is misinformation and selectively censor speech are clear, especially when we look at the context of recent events in Victoria. The MAD bill and proposed changes to Victoria's anti-vilification laws pose serious threats to free speech and open debate. We must push back against these efforts to control public discourse and stand up for the right to express diverse opinions, question authority, and engage in robust, honest dialogue. Only then can we ensure a truly democratic society where everyone's voice is heard. I stand for your freedom of speech. Use your voice now and let me know. Will you stand too?
Thank you, Krystle. Fantastic speech. Thank you for standing for us. Our next speaker for this afternoon is a person who, for many of you, won't even need an introduction. He's fairly well known, big social media profile. I believe, David, it is the biggest now that person has resigned. Am I right? Maybe, yeah. David was one of the David Limbrick represents the Southeast Metro region for Victoria as a member of the Legislative Council for the Libertarian Party. And he, with his then partner in crime during the COVID years, were two of the faces, two of the actors that made me get up and I found somebody I could vote for instead of trying to vote against those that I detested. It was a big moment for me. I was 40-something years old to figure that out and find somebody like that. David, please come take the stage, mate. Share with us a few words of your wisdom. He's a massive advocate for free speech and rights for people. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much. The first rule of politics is showing up, and you showed up today. And I think, yeah, okay. Okay. Freedom is under attack at all levels.
Gary.
Okay. Freedom is under attack at all levels, at a state and federal level. Many of you have already heard about the misinformation and disinformation bill, and as Krystle alluded to, Victoria as well has a new challenge in the proposed anti-vilification laws. I've been asking the government about these laws. They've been in the pipeline for years now. But one of the things that I asked the Attorney General in Parliament about was, under these new laws, could the Attorney General guarantee that the dictionary definition of a woman would not become outlawed? And to my horror, she couldn't answer that. She couldn't give a straight answer. What these laws are proposed to do is to effectively criminalise certain forms of ridicule or inciting serious contempt. Well, I'd like to incite some contempt for the government, actually. What we saw, one of the biggest harm of what happened during the pandemic was not actually the response, but the biggest harm was that the government got a taste of power and they liked it. And what I'm concerned about is that they're rolling out all of these new restrictions because they want to decide now what is truth. They want to decide what is acceptable dialogue, what is acceptable public discourse, what's within the window and what isn't. And they're going to use the power of the state to enforce that. And that's why we need to push back against this. And another thing, that one of the silver linings of what did happen during the pandemic is that many people, I'm guessing probably most of you here, for the first time experienced personally the power of the state infringing on your personal life. And when those people that have had their liberty taken from them are those people that cherish it the most. And I believe that because so many people had their freedom taken away during the pandemic, more people than ever are looking around and saying, who is defending our freedom? And it's the people here. The people here are the ones that are standing up for freedom. This is not going to be a short battle. This is something that is going to take a long time. And one of the reasons is that our two-party system is basically broken. If people have been following the what's been happening, in federal court recently with the defamation trial, one of the most shocking things that I noticed was how scared the opposition is of the government. They're scared of the government. They're scared of saying the wrong thing because they'll be called names. But I'll say this, the Libertarians are not scared. We cannot simply be concerned about people calling us names or about the media framing something the wrong way. We have to stand on principle, and we have to fight back against these new infringements on our freedom. And that's what we're doing here today. We're showing the government, we're showing people that there is resistance. There is resistance. People will push back. People will push back, and that we won't let this go without a fight. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Absolutely, we will stand. We will fight back. Now, as much as you've seen a lot of libertarian messaging and branding around today, this issue that we're here for is bigger than any single political party. And so our next speaker is not from the Libertarian Party, but from Pauline Hanson One Nation. So, Warren Pickering, after having served 10 years as a combat engineer in the Australian Defence Force, then witnessing the erosion of sovereignty and the decimation of our civil liberties during COVID, was inspired to engage in the political sphere and provide service to our community in a more meaningful way. He's a staunch advocate for the democratic rights of Australians, the human rights of all peoples, and upholding the tenets of the Australian Constitution. He's now One Nation Victoria State President, political advisor to One Nation's Victoria State member Ricky Lee Terrell, and One Nation lead Senate candidate for Victoria. Warren, come take the stage, buddy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you all. I did write a speech, but I don't know where it is. So, strap in. This could go either way. Sometimes good, sometimes it's not. Look, firstly, I want to thank the Libertarians for putting on this important event and extending an invitation for other parties to speak. When we talk about promoting unity on shared values, this is exactly what we mean. We have enough differences that we can't merge as parties, but we have more that unites us than what divides us. And on those topics, we need to capitalise. Now, I'm not going to flog a dead horse on the connotations or the implications of these bills, both this one and the anti-vilification laws that are proposed in Victorian State Parliament at the moment, because I think everybody here is part of the, it's kind of the echo chamber of the educated. We all get it. It's about getting our message further than this. But I will say, I just want to do a bit of a crowd interaction here. This is not to vilify anyone or ostracise anyone, but can I see a show of hands on who actually made a submission against the Mad Bill? Good work. Have a look around. That's fantastic. Now, this is the message I'm trying to get out to the wider community, those that aren't politically astute like you and I are. We need to get our messages out further. Now, a lot of people attend rallies and post on social media, which is great. It helps us raise awareness for our causes, these causes that are in the best interest of all Australians. But we need to get our voices to travel further. And there's no point attending rallies if you're not going to then jump on when we do get inquiries up, sign petitions. So people like David and Ricky can speak on this in Parliament. You absolutely need to follow it up with emailing members, signing petitions, and just crack the whip, because they're not bloody listening. Now, the preservation of a free society requires eternal vigilance and action. It always has, and it always will. For us to continue to defend our civil liberties, we need to not only unite forces and get that message out there, but we need to be vocal about it. We can't allow ours to be the generation that fails in this eternal struggle. All future generations of Australians are depending on us. Now, there's been an emphasis already today on uniting left and right, and I absolutely agree. Again, there's more that unites us than divides us, and we need to capitalise on those items. Malcolm Roberts has been a very staunch advocate in this space. He no longer refers to different factions as left or right. It's just everyone's just an Australian. And we are all doing the best that we can in the defence of all future generations of Australians. I might have a couple of notes in my phone that I don't want to miss, guys, so let me just jump in. So I did make a submission. I was going to read that out today, but I'm not, because it goes too far into the nuts and bolts of where this bill specifically, and the digital ID bill from 4 months ago actually impedes on our human rights and undermines the Australian Constitution. But just like with the Digital Identity Bill, I tend to read these bills when advising Ricky Lee through the lens perception of a conspiracy theorist. I think that's something we all should be doing, because we know every conspiracy theory over the last couple of years has had a certain element of truth to it. So if you're not reading things that way, you want your head read for a start. But secondly, as with the Digital ID Bill, the biggest concerns in this bill for me are the deliberately, the legal wording, the jargon that's in there. It's made deliberately complicated so that it can be deliberately misinterpreted or interpreted any which way the government likes to achieve its own desired outcomes. There's also no trigger point mechanism. There was no friction point that it explains in the explanatory memorandum as to why this bill was required, why they wanted to draft it in the first place. The community didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for this. Did you ask for this? I don't know anybody that asked for this. Same with the Digital Identity Bill. Now that raises concerns too, because we know if the community didn't ask for this and the community is strongly opposed to this and no factions in the federal politics are getting behind this except the sitting government, it implies that it comes from somewhere else. Now who's someone else? Who's higher than the Australian? Yeah, damn right. That's the point, isn't it? It's not an accident that these very similar bills are being pushed concurrently in every Western nation on the planet right now. It's a concerted effort by the UN and the WAF to consolidate power into the hands of a few key unelected bureaucrats in foreign countries who wish to dictate to us our social and economic policy. They've preyed on our political ignorance for far too long, and we won't allow it to continue. This stops now. Just another key point that I'd like to touch on before I go is us with the Libertarians and the United Front that we've alluded to. We have another shared goal here, and that's the fact that government is too big. We can all feel the encroaching government aspect in every area of our lives. They are everywhere. So what we demand, not only here, is that they listen to us regarding freedom of speech, action and movement, but we also demand that they let our kids be kids, get out of our faces, get out of our business, and get out of our lives. Now, I'll finish with a quote. I'm sure you've probably heard it. It floats around on the socials, but I just think it's brilliant, so I'm going to touch it again now. Ronald Reagan said this, and I believe it was in reference to strategic defence around the Cold War. So you and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth. I will sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness. And while this does ring true in the current context, I'd also add this. The darkness within this world that seeks to undermine our freedoms of speech, action and movement fears illumination from our collective consciousness. So get out there and continue to be a beacon of truth, Victoria, because we are the light.
You put your phone down, I just wasn't sure if you were going to do something else. Just give you the benefit of the doubt. Thanks, Warren. Our last speaker for this afternoon is a man who I've come to call a friend. He's a 30-something, 36-year-old, Jordan. Where are you? I think it's 36. Yes. It looks pretty good for 42. I'm joking, Jordan. Jordan is a man who's been down some dark paths and come out the other side, having learned a lot about himself and the world along the way. Probably more than many of us can say. He's an ex-prisoner. Actually, as a quick anecdote, the first time I ever met Jordan was when he was billeted to stay at my place one night. I thought, this is the first time I've ever had an ex-inmate in my house. But fortunately, he's reformed, a law graduate, and a person who's lived more life at 36 years than some people do in an entire lifetime. He's passionate. He's passionate as an advocate for free speech, property rights, and the ability of individuals to shape the world around them for themselves and for their families. He's leading the fight against this bill from outside the Senate, but he's ready to keep fighting from inside if elected, whichever major party ends up winning government. So Jordan Dittloff, I salute you and invite you to come and address us.
Look at you guys. It is absolutely awesome to see you all here. Terrific. And so far the weather gods, the mythical weather gods of Victoria have been held at bay. A quick speech is a good speech, so hopefully I can beat the rain. Now, Chris just talked about what happens if either side of government, either side of the major parties, wins government at the next federal election. Many of you over the last week or so will have heard the Liberals' supposed road to Damascus moment, where they've come out now and they've said that they're going to oppose what was originally their legislation. So we never ever want to forget or let them forget that it was the Scott Morrison government that originally proposed the misinformation, disinformation bill. Scott Morrison and his Liberal government are failures and sycophants, colluders, and people I hold to a far higher standard and found lacking than I do the ALP government. The Liberals should know better. But they don't. Peter Dutton recently said in Parliament that Julie Inman Grant is the finest public servant in Canberra. Needless to say, I disagree. It might soon be illegal to say that I disagree. She's, as Reuben from the FSU will tell you, she doesn't like when the criticism and censorship or pushback comes the other way. She's a very sensitive censorship czar, which is a bit of a problem in her line of work, I'd imagine, because she's very good at making enemies. But Peter Dutton isn't one of them. And I remember back in the early days of my involvement when I was still young and foolish and I was a member of the Liberal Party and I was a young Liberal. I'm actually a little bit more embarrassed to talk about that than I am about my criminal record. But forgive me, Australians have great compassion and they believe in rehabilitation, and yes, even former young Liberals can be rehabilitated into society. But back then, in 2013, before the 2013 federal election, Tony Abbott was the opposition leader. He'd been the opposition leader against a minority Greens and Labor government, and more on that later because we've probably got that in our future, or even worse, a Labor Teal minority government. But Tony Abbott, as opposition leader, campaigned in 2013 saying he was a champion of free speech, that he was going to fight for free speech and that he was going to repeal amendments to Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act. Who here remembers that 18C? Remember when that was the worst free speech problem we had to worry about in this country? And remember when the Liberals got elected and they couldn't even do that? He got elected with an overwhelming landslide in his favour, and the moment he had the opportunity to fight for free speech and to repeal this objectively terrible law that even someone like Jordan Shanks from Friendly Geordies has called to be scrapped, renowned Labor hack, thinks 18C should be scrapped, and Tony Abbott, supposedly the last great Liberal Prime Minister, couldn't even do that at the height of his powers. So the idea that Peter Dutton is going to potentially win government at the next federal election and then have a come-to-Jesus moment and do the right thing on censorship is something I find very, very hard to believe, and I'd urge you all to find it very hard to believe as well. This is why it is critical that we have truly independent, truly pro-free speech centre and centre-right senators on the crossbench in Canberra. The Senate is our last hope for holding the major party duopoly to account. Warren spoke about it just now, and I'm glad he did, because I also plan to emphasise this. The World Economic Forum listed in its 2024 Global Risks Report that the greatest threat, the greatest risk to the global order, now their idea of the global order I think might be very different to those we hold, the greatest threat to the world in 2024 was, you guessed it, misinformation and disinformation. Now, to see, following that, regimes around the world, regimes from, as Damien Kuru put it to me yesterday on ADH TV, socialist dictatorships such as the UK, to see these governments all around the world at the same time suddenly decide that they need to roll out relentlessly these misinformation, disinformation regimes cannot be a coincidence. I'm a law graduate, I'm a person of reason and logic, and the problem with conspiracy theories is that the last couple of years keep proving them true. So it's a very difficult gig to be a satirist or a political conspiracy theorist in 2024, and 2025 doesn't look like it's going to be much better. Now, Warren also talked about something I want to talk about, which is action. What can we do? And he said, make your voice heard. Now, that's an admirable sentiment, and it's true. We should be making our voice heard. But why is that so hard? Why is it that there aren't more people here today? Why is it that every time we want to talk about this issue, our signals are getting suppressed rather than boosted? The answer is that the mainstream media are not just uninterested, they're not just ignorant, they're complicit. They are beneficiaries of this protectionist legislation. This legislation says that when Sky News or a university academic says something, it's not misinformation, but if you say it, it is misinformation. The same words, the very same words under this legislation. Now, if that sounds like a future you'd like to avoid, then I'm guessing it is, based on the fact that you're here, what we need to do is not simply continue to make our voices heard, we need to be coordinated, we need to be strategic, and we need to work together to achieve meaningful political change. Now, that means making sure that at the next federal election here in Victoria, the 6th Senate spot is not won by a minor party such as legalised cannabis. Now, some of you might have heard of this development in recent weeks. We've had Warren and I are getting joined. It's getting pretty busy in the Senate race here in Victoria. Lots of opportunists and lots of people who see an opportunity that they think they might be able to take advantage of. And one name I didn't have on my federal election bingo card is a name that some of you here might be familiar with and have some sense of what she might think about this issue, and that is Fiona Patten. Boo indeed, boo indeed. Fiona Patten will tell you that she's pro all the right things, but when she had the opportunity, when she actually had the balance of power and could have prevented some of the worst legislation we've seen in this state from happening, she chose to collude with the ALP government. So whether you are a One Nation supporter, whether you are a Libertarian supporter, whether you are someone who at the last election supported the UAP and would consider yourself politically homeless, I know from speaking to many of you before this rally began that that third category is where many of you consider yourselves to lie. It is imperative that you make sure that your first and second preferences are Libertarian and One Nation, in whichever order that seems right to you. But we must be working in a targeted way to achieve real change. Now, you've all been incredibly patient. You've all listened to several speakers, and I said a short speech is a good speech, so I'm going to finish on this. This time, several years ago, when we were all gathered here and not far from here in the first rallies and protests post-COVID, when there was still the prospect that instead of being sort of generally beneficent background figures as the police have been today, we still didn't know whether we were going to get shot at with rubber bullets or tear gas. We've got people here today who actually participated in the protests before that, where they were shot at with tear gas and bullets, and they were prosecuted under malicious prosecutions for that were eventually overthrown. Now, at those rallies and at those protests, there was a catch-call, a rallying cry that I think would be appropriate to bring back now we're faced with similarly terrible legislation to the Victoria's pandemic legislation. Some of you might remember it. It was 3 very powerful words that I think I'd like to reinvigorate, and I want to really finish this rally on a really strong note and see if we can make something exciting happen. So, does anyone know what those 3 words were, that chant?
Kill the bill! 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 Guys, keep going.
Kill the bill! Kill the bill! What's going on here, guys? Kill the bill! Kill... Oh!
Keep going.
What's he doing? It's a quick change act.
All right, let's go. All right, now in New South Wales, they had a symbolic smoking ceremony. So they burnt the bill in New South Wales, but here in Victoria, we Libertarians like to do something else.
The bill leader. Any closing remarks, Gordon?
Oh, I think that pretty much sums it up. Enough said.
Fantastic. Exactly. Long live freedom. Thank you everybody for turning up today, for listening to us, for supporting each other. If I can offer any remarks, closing remarks in the conclusion of this event, it will be to go forth, be patient with each other, be open and listening, be happy warriors. And for those of you who don't know what that means, I would say this: it's really easy to be mad at the world when you see what's going on around you. What's not so easy is to attract others to you if you're always angry. So save your anger for when it matters and for who it matters. But instead, be passionate, be loving, be patient and kind, and spread the word. Thank you very much, folks.